Hello and welcome to our program on Alabama's Prescription Drug Monitoring Program and You, a Practical Perspective. My name is Brent Fox. I'm an Associate Professor in the Department of Health Outcomes Research and Policy in the Harrison School of Pharmacy at Auburn University. And I will be your moderator for this program. We're going to hear from several presenters throughout the course of the program, and I'll be popping in and popping out, if you will, as we progress through the program. So let's go ahead and begin with some housekeeping, actually. And the first thing I want to point out is that this is actually a recorded program, of course. You're watching me in a recording on the website that you went to. But you're going to see other presenters who were actually recorded during a live program that was delivered at Auburn at the School of Pharmacy. So you're going to hear from myself in additional occurrences throughout this program, and that will have also been recorded at another time. So the point is, this is a recorded program that was delivered at Auburn in October of 2015. And if you're a pharmacist and you're watching this for CE credit, on the link, or on the page where you clicked on the link to launch this program, there is also a link for the post-test and evaluation survey that will allow you to get CE credit for this program. At the time of this recording, we only have CE for pharmacists. That may change in the future as you watch this. You will also see throughout portions of the program that the audience that was there for the live program in Auburn was able to respond to questions that presenters posed with a clicker. And you will see the audience responses to those questions presented on your slides or on your screen. We encourage you, as those questions are presented, to take just a moment to think of what your answer would be prior to seeing the results that were obtained during the live program. And then lastly, as I said, you're going to hear from a large group of speakers, and we hope that you will really take the opportunity to learn what they're telling you, because the speakers were selected based on their personal experience and professional experience with the prescription drug monitoring program here in our state. And really, we believe they provide a lot of value to the program, so really encourage you to tune in as you hear from each one of them. So related to that, these groups all had a major role in delivering this program. The Alabama Department of Public Health, the Alabama Board of Pharmacy, the Alabama District Attorneys Association, the State Board of Medical Examiners, Health Information Design, which is located in Auburn, and of course Harrison School of Pharmacy. And I want to point out that this project was funded through a grant from the Bureau of Justice Assistance, which is part of the Department of Justice. So they are able to provide the funding that allows you to participate in this program at no charge and to submit for CE, again, if you're a pharmacist, also for no charge. So in accordance with the ACPE policy and procedures regarding continuing education credit, I just need to point out that I have no actual or potential conflict of interest related to the content of this program. Okay, now let's actually talk about the content you're going to hear about. So our first learning objective is that we hope at the end of this program you will be able to describe the prescription drug abuse and misuse problem in our state. We also expect that you will be able to describe how to register for access to the PDMP database for Alabama, that you will be able, once you're in the PDMP, to be able to access a patient's history. And then also, since this is an area that has a major regulatory component, we want you to be able to describe the law that requires dispensers to report dispensed controlled substances to the database, as well as the pharmacy's responsibility in reporting to the database. And then our last learning objective is we want you to be able to describe how the information obtained from the controlled substance database can be used when managing a patient's medications and then their health care. Our agenda that's going to equip you to be able to do those objectives is, number one, we're going to have an introduction, which you will hear from me in just a few moments. We're going to hear from another presenter about the actual problem as it relates to drug abuse and misuse. We're going to hear from the Alabama Board of Medical Examiners and their perspectives on this topic. Then you're going to hear about state requirements for PDMP. You're going to have an opportunity to see how to use the database, and we encourage you at the point in the program where we're doing a demonstration of the database, we encourage you to go ahead on your computer to log in and go step by step as we go through the database. We encourage you to do the same thing in real time. Then you're going to see how reporting to the database occurs. And then at the end, which is something we're really excited about, we were able to have a really interactive discussion in Auburn where the audience submitted questions, and then all of the presenters were able to provide their answers to those discussion questions in the form of a panel. So we were able to capture those and deliver those as a part of this recording that you're watching through the ADPH website. So obviously we're talking about prescription drug monitoring, but I want to take just a moment for you to think about, in your personal opinion, what constitutes a prescription drug monitoring program. So we'll take just a moment for you to think about that and what components you believe make up a PDMP. Hopefully, some things that came to your mind when you were thinking about a PDMP is, number one, that they are statewide databases that are, of course, electronic, and they contain both prescribing and dispensing records. And we focus on prescribing and dispensing records for controlled substances, but you also may see other potential drugs of abuse in the database. And then a very important piece of this puzzle is that the state law, of course for us is Alabama, but state law has a major role in determining and defining what goes into the PDMP, and then also defining the usage expectations, if you will, for prescribers, dispensers, as they call pharmacists, and others. So here's our first question that the audience was presented at the original live version of this program. And the question was, regarding Alabama's prescription drug monitoring program, letter A, I have actually manually submitted data. Answer option B, I have searched for a particular patient. Answer option C, I have reviewed reports sent to me by the Department of Public Health. D, honestly, I know very little about the PDMP. And then E, the folks who were truly honest, they said, really, I'm here because the CE is free and it's a great chance to come to Auburn. So take just a second to pick your answer and see how you compare with the respondents in Auburn. And as you can see, nearly half of those individuals in Auburn said they have actually searched for a particular patient, so they've had some active use of the database. The next most common answer, and we certainly appreciate folks' honesty, is that they really did not know much about the database. And it's really great to have those folks in the audience because that's who you want to target to learn and teach more about the database. So we're really glad to see those people. And then, of course, our third most frequent response was that folks are there for the free CE. We know the value of free CE, absolutely. So thinking about your patients and those who come to the pharmacy, or even those who are getting a prescription from a prescriber, and what each state requires in terms of a patient being notified that their information can and will be submitted to a PDMP. Currently, 11 states and Washington, D.C. require prescribers and dispensers to provide a written notice to their customers or patients, consumers, that their information is being submitted to the PDMP and that it may be accessed. Now you can see in this map of the U.S. that Alabama is not one of those 11 states currently. One thing, however, that you will be able to receive after completing the program evaluation and the post-test is a window cling that you can put on your pharmacy that basically indicates, I have received training on the PDMP for our state. And that is not necessarily the official notification to patients that their information can be submitted to the PDMP, but it is a way to let your patients know that you have knowledge of the PDMP and how it relates to your practice. So that is mailed to you after you complete the post-test. So who might benefit, and what might those benefits look like as it relates to the PDMP? And I really like to think about, I like to group, if you will, prescribers and pharmacists together, because their benefits are really the same, in my opinion, in general. And really the first thing is that you have patient-level data about the use of medications, usually to manage pain, or some other type of controlled substance medication. So you're able to have a more informed picture of your patient, but you're also able to know if you have patients who may be having nefarious reasons for searching for these medications. For the pharmacist in the group or the audience, you may be able to use the PDMP to identify prescribing patterns that you think are questionable. That certainly does occur. Fortunately, it's not very common, but those things can occur. So really, prescribers and pharmacists can use the PDMP to get a better handle or picture, if you will, of their patients. And then there's that added use for pharmacists to identify prescribing patterns that may be questionable. For the patients, I think the first thing that's important for them to understand is that their information that's within a PDMP, regardless of the state, it's maintained in a private manner. And patients may not necessarily fully appreciate the benefit of their prescribers and their pharmacists knowing their usage of controlled substances, but it is very important for us as providers to know that information so we can help the patients. So where the prescribers and pharmacists benefit from knowing about their patients' patterns, the patients are actually the ones who benefit because there can be interventions by the providers based on what they see in the database. And then lastly, we cannot ignore the benefit to law enforcement of a PDMP. One thing that it really does help with law enforcement is it helps decrease the time spent on investigations, just because you have a better, easier access to data, and you can help identify patterns, whether it's a provider or a patient, that are questionable. So really for law enforcement, we're talking about access that's efficient. So why are we actually talking about the topic? Well, approximately 40 individuals die per day in this country due to the use of prescription pain medications. And the key there is that we're talking about the use of prescription pain medications. So not street drugs, but medications that are only supposed to be obtained pursuant to a prescription. And that number, 40 per day, is actually higher than heroin and cocaine combined. So this is a true public health crisis. And it was recognized back as early as the early 1900s, and actually the first PDMP was developed in 1918 in New York State. But the longest continuously running PDMP was established in California in 1939. So obviously this has been, at least in some locations, something we've been aware of for a long time. What you do see, however, regardless of how long the program's been in place in the state that you're in, is that the drugs that are monitored or reported vary from state to state. Most states monitor Schedules 2 through 4. Some will add Schedule 5. Some will also add non-controlled substances that have a high potential for abuse. So there's variation across states in terms of the medications that are monitored. In 2002, there were several programs that were enacted that are important to the history of PDMP. The first one, the National Alliance for Model State Drug Laws, creates or drafts model drug laws, and the goal of this program is really to help standardize PDMPs. And this is a nonprofit that was funded by Congress. And then the Harold Rogers Prescription Drug Monitoring Program is out of the Department of Justice, and this actually provides funding for planning and implementing PDMPs. And then a few years later, in 2005, the National All Schedules Prescription Electronic Reporting Act provides statutory authorization for implementation or enhancing existing PDMPs. So these are important programs that have been established to help establish or further refine PDMPs in our country. So if we think about enhancing a PDMP, what makes them better or what makes them effective? I think it's pretty clear that you need to focus on medications that have a high potential for abuse, number one. Number two, the monitoring needs to be proactive and not reactive. Number three, you need to clearly define who has access to the data, and you also need to provide policies, procedures, and methods that control access. Number four, which is really why we are here, is that you need to provide training in your PDMP database. Number 5, you need to continually evaluate the benefits versus the cost, always looking for improvements in your database. And then number 6, and this is important to ensure that there is trust in the data, that the data are not subject to public or open record laws. And then number 7, and this is something we'll hear about probably several times throughout this program, about looking outside of your state's borders. So we're going to talk about Alabama initially, but we're going to hear later about what happens when we think about data and prescriptions from outside of our state. So looking at interstate situations related to misuse or abuse are also very important. So now let's think about nationally and how many states actually have laws establishing PDMPs. And you can see that at the time of this recording, 49 states and Washington, D.C. do have laws to establish a PDMP. Missouri currently is the only state that does not have a PDMP. So thinking about the agencies or groups that actually operate the PDMPs at the state level, you can see the vast majority of states on this map are blue, including our state. And the states that are blue, there's usually a health department or some other board of pharmacy maybe, or a single state agency that runs or operates the PDMP. Obviously in Alabama, it's the Department of Public Health. In other states, law enforcement may actually have a role in operating it, or multiple state agencies can be involved with operating the PDMP. And you can see in this map that, again, the majority of states are blue, and the states that are blue have a committee that advises the operating agency. So in Alabama, we actually have a large number of groups or agencies that advise the public health department about our PDMP. And I want to take just a moment to tell you what those agencies are to hopefully help you get a better appreciation for how important this is. So the following agencies all serve on an advisory committee for Alabama's Department of Public Health as it relates to the PDMP. And they are the Medical Association of Alabama, the Alabama Dental Association, the Alabama Pharmacy Association, the Alabama Veterinarian Medicine Association, the State Health Officer, the Alabama Hospital Association, the Executive Director of the State Board of Pharmacy, the Executive Director of the Board of Medical Examiners, the Alabama Optometric Association, and then one representative from each of the certifying boards established under the Alabama Uniform Controlled Substances Act, Alabama Medicaid, Alabama Podiatry Association, and then lastly the Alabama Department of Mental Health. So that's a very large number of agencies or groups that serve on this committee, and I think it helps underscore the importance of this program to the citizens of our state. So how is the PDMP funded? And this is probably a question that you've wondered. And you can see there's a lot of variation in the colors on this map to show that there is not a lot of consistency across the country. Of course, we'll focus on our state. And in Alabama, our PDMP is funded from prescribers' controlled substance certificate fee. So a portion of those individuals in our state who can write prescriptions, a portion of their controlled substance certificate fee is used to support the PDMP. No fees paid by pharmacists or pharmacies to the Board of Pharmacy are used to provide financial support to the PDMP. So here we have another map with a fair amount of variation in colors, indicating not necessarily a large consistent practice or pattern across the country. And what we're looking at is the substances that are monitored. And you can see that Alabama is the pinkish color, and that indicates that our state PDMP monitors schedules 2 through 5. You can see other colors indicate other drugs being monitored. The lightest or the lighter of the blue colors, that is states that monitor schedules 2 through 4 only. And then the darkest orange color are states that monitor schedules 2 through 5 as well as certain non-controlled substances. So you can see there's some variation across the U.S. And then thinking about reporting to the database. What are those requirements? And again, we have a multicolored U.S. map. And again, Alabama is in the color that's somewhat of a pinkish color. And there are 19 states plus Washington, D.C. that are the same color as Alabama. And those are states that have to report their prescription dispensing records or prescription records within 24 hours to the database. So that is the second largest group. The other group is the green group, and that is 20 states that have to report within 7 days of dispensing the medication and creating the prescription to the PDMP for their particular state. One state, which is Oklahoma, has what we'll call a near real-time reporting requirement, which is usually around 4 to 5 seconds that they're reporting to their database. So I mentioned earlier interstate or cross-state line sharing of data and why that's important. And what we're seeing here, again, is a large variation in color, so again, a large variation in practice patterns. And what we're showing is which states can and how they can share data from their PDMPs with other states. So the green color, again, which is Alabama, are states that share data with other state PDMPs. So Alabama currently shares data with Kentucky and Maine. And later in the program, when we talk about actually going in and finding records, we'll talk about how to actually access data from Kentucky or Maine, as well as Alabama, of course. The other colors, so the blue color, are states that share data with authorized users in other states. So the distinction between that practice pattern and Alabama's practice pattern is in Alabama we share data from PDMP to PDMP. In the blue states, the data can actually be shared with the users in other states, not necessarily directly through their PDMP. And then the cream color or the light brownish color, those are states that use both sharing methods. So why is that important? Here's just a quick, hopefully helpful visual depiction of why that's important. And what we're showing in the colors on the maps for North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, and Louisiana are the darker the color, the larger number of prescriptions that were written in Georgia for controlled substances but were filled in those particular states. So you can see that Alabama, hopefully you can see, that Alabama is the darkest color, followed by South Carolina, and then North Carolina and Louisiana. And what we're showing there is that Alabama, at least for this particular year of data, had the largest number of prescriptions filled in Alabama that were written in Georgia. So what about states and their requirement for prescriptions that are written out of state or filled out of state for patients that are in state? So what we're showing here is what we call the non-resident pharmacy requirement. So 46 states, the ones in the, again, the creamish or the lightish brown color, 46 states and Washington, D.C. have a law that requires pharmacies out of state to report dispensing of controlled substances for residents of that particular state. And then thinking about our four-legged friends and the providers that care for them, so what about veterinarians? You can see that Alabama is shaded in the blue like the other 16 states in Washington are shaded. And what we're showing here are states that require veterinarians to report controlled substance dispensing for their particular practice. So the interesting thing here is a story that I can tell, and I can't take credit for the story, but I can certainly tell it to you. In Alabama, there was actually an individual who took their dog to a veterinarian, and they had taught their dog to cough on cue. And they actually would take the dog to the veterinarian, whatever the signal was, I'm not sure what it was, but they would make the signal or give the signal. The dog would cough. The veterinarian would write for a cough medicine for the dog, and of course the patient would take that, or the patient's owner would take that medicine, and then they would take it themselves. So that's a real example of why we have veterinarian reporting requirements. And of course those requirements are not as stringent or strict for animals, so veterinarians aren't required to report as often or electronically like we are if you care for a human. So, thinking about our state and how long have we been using our PDMP? So, we picked 2006 as the question year, and this is a question that was posed to the audience at the original live program. So, the Controlled Substance Database in Alabama contains controlled substance data reported in 2006, so 10 years ago from when this recording is created. Do you think that's true or false? Are there data going back all the way to 2006? So our audience at the live program, 58% of them were incorrect and 42% were correct. So the PDMP for Alabama was launched in April of 2006. So we have data all the way back to that particular month and year. So we're going to transition to our other presenters in just a few moments. Before I do, I want to give you just some links to additional resources. You can Google these titles. You can click on the links. You can type the links into your browser, whatever the case may be. But these are several resources over 2 screens that show you additional information or location for additional information that you can get to learn more about the PDMP. These resources are not specific to Alabama, but they certainly apply to Alabama. So they're more at the national level. And I wanted to remind you or to point out that some of the graphics in your program may be difficult to read on your computer screen. And I want to remind you that the slides are going to be available, they actually are available, as a PDF download on the program webpage. You can just click over on there and look at it at your leisure. All right, so now I'd like to introduce our next presenter, Mr. Barry Matson. He's the Deputy Director for the Office of Prosecution Services, as well as the Alabama District Attorneys Association. He is also the chairperson of the Alabama Drug Abuse Task Force, which is comprised of state agencies, private businesses, law enforcement, education, and health professionals, as well as private citizens. So the purpose of that group is to assess addiction and drug crime in our state, to find solutions, and then publicly report their findings. So please now, I'm going to return the program over to Barry Matson.
I began my career as a prosecutor 25 years ago, and I remember like the second or third day walking down the hall of the courthouse in Talladega, I saw a friend of mine that I'd grown up with, and he was the first guy that came over my house to spend the night. We camped in the woods, then later we rode motorcycles together. Lost touch after high school, heard he'd been in a bad car wreck. Saw him, hey, how you doing? And spoke for a minute. I said, what are you doing here? He said, I'm checking in my probation officer. What happened? And of course, it was before that I came to work there at the DA's office. He said, well, after my car wreck, I had 4 back surgeries, and I got on prescription pills, and I got caught forging scripts when I couldn't get them anymore. When I started a 25-year journey of being a prosecutor and seeing 80 or 90% of my cases somehow dealing with addiction or drugs. Back in the 70s and sooner, people broke in houses because they were stealers, they were burglars, they wanted what was in there. Now they break into the house to get money, if it's not mischief, to buy drugs. Or either the anger or the frustration or the alcohol or whatever was somehow associated. Every case is that way we face now. And so I've been in hundreds and maybe not thousands of sentencing dockets, and I've seen people stand there wanting to do better. And a lot of times I could predict. If they were there by themselves, I thought, man, they had down a prayer. If they had a mama still there, or a brother, or a friend, or a pastor, or somebody there with them, they had a chance. But what happens when people get addicted, their brain changes. Whether you got that DNA, whatever, not a scientist obviously, that you have that first drink and you're an alcoholic or a drug addict. But also, if you use it long enough, and I know my understanding is the dopamine, you quit producing dopamine because you get that feeling from the drug, and all of a sudden, just to feel normal, you need the drug again. And I'm saying any drug. I'm talking about synthetics and heroin, everything else. Left Talladega as the chief deputy DA in 2006 to be the deputy director of the DA's Association. Initially, to set up cybercrime units around the state. I set up labs. We worked with Secret Service, put a school together, and did cybercrime. But I always knew that what I wanted to do and get involved in and try to work with law enforcement, because I know guys that work narcotics. They know that we're fighting this kind of backwards. People say the war on drugs is a failure. Kind of like the war on terrorism to me. They'll never be us. They'll never sit down and the dope dealers will surrender and we'll win, okay? But it's the same as terrorism. But just because you legalize heroin, well, how are they going to get it? Nobody's going to prescribe it. It's still addictive. All the things that are destructive about these drugs will always exist, and we've got to prevent them and reduce the stigma for people who are addicted and get them help and treatment. But people who manufacture and sell these narcotics that are just poison have got to be stopped. That's my opinion. But I work in the legislature, and I do a lot of work with different folks that Louis Jones Pharmacy Association and folks, people work with the Medical Association, and we work on a lot of different legislation. And from synthetic drug rewrites of our legislation to I know bad word Implex, the methadone database. I was heavily involved in that, and that kind of, and I will tell you, as frustrating as that is, meth labs in Alabama have dropped to nearly nothing. They're one-pot cooks for personal use now, if you find those. The larger cooks, Mississippi went prescription only, and I saw that map earlier where Georgia doesn't share with Alabama and how many prescriptions from Georgia were filling Alabama. It looked just like the map for meth 2 years ago when Mississippi went prescription only and the meth cookers came to Alabama and were eating Mobile and the west side of Alabama up. And we changed that law a couple of years ago, changed the driver's license and that kind of thing, the residency, and said if you live in a state that's prescription for ephedrine, you got to have one here. And it worked. The PDMP can't work alone to stop meth. But the other things we did made it work. I'm a believer that the Implex system alone didn't stop meth. Just like the PDMP alone is not going to stop abuse. It's got to take effort and a lot of other things coming together. But the PDMP is critical to any success we're going to have. I've got a book from the 70s. Why I kept it, I don't know. If you saw my office, maybe you recognize it, realize. But it's the FOP drug manual. And it was mostly advertisement, but there was a few pages of information in there. And there was a picture of a lady with sores from shots from heroin. It just scared me to death as a child, And so it's kind of resonated with me. But I came across the book a few years ago. I looked, and it listed the drug threats in Alabama in 1972. What our threats were. And they were synthetic drugs, prescription drugs, cocaine, methamphetamine, alcohol, and marijuana. You read a little further, and heroin. All right, the prescription drugs it listed were Dilaudid and morphine. Okay, I remember back then, I had my tonsils out. I stayed a week in the hospital. I didn't leave. When I was in the hospital, they didn't give me some pills. I left not hurting. Marijuana, which was your cousin in the trailer down by the creek. It was at THC level of 6%. All right, synthetics were PCP, angel dust, that kind of stuff in a lab in California. Cocaine was powder cocaine, hard to obtain. And heroin was, some places in big cities, but those were the threats. So look, today, they're the same threats. They've just grown their business, marketed a lot different. We've changed the way we prescribe medicines and provide those to patients. And but the drug threats are still the same. And our response to it is still the same. We say, okay, don't do drugs a little bit. We say don't do it. But we have a system in America and in Alabama where we wait till somebody, and I guarantee, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but I guarantee you there's probably not anybody in this room that if I asked to raise your hand, wouldn't raise your hand, that you or your family, someone you love, a close friend or family, has not been affected by drug addiction, some way, drug or alcohol. I'm not going to ask for a hand, but I know that it permeates the society. But we wait till that person makes some really stupid, bad decisions, and they become addicted, and then once you're addicted, trust me, I've seen it. You don't want God, family, sex, community, anything anymore. You just want the freedom, liberty to get that drug. So all of a sudden, burglarizing a house seems like a pretty rational option to get money to buy my drugs because grandmother cut me off and I stole her last crock pot and traded it for drugs and I can't get any more money. So you break in the house, we catch you. You come into this big criminal justice system where it's the only way in America you can coerce treatment. Because I can pay for Fred's, I can put him in that thing on TV, something passages of Malibu, come to Malibu and be healed. I could put him in that place, $1 million a month. He can walk out the back door. I can't make him stay. Mental health commitment, so for a couple of days. Be lucky to get a 28-day. And I don't know if you know about treatment. 28 days is drying out. That's not treatment. People say, I went to treatment for 28 days. No. you're still addicted. You're going to have a few days where you're not using it, and then you're not really where you need to be. So the criminal justice system said, listen, we used to just send you to jail. You caught with crack cocaine, you burglarized the house, you go to jail. We filled our jails up. Okay, now we know we can't do that. So, the DAs and law enforcement, really, drug courts, that's where they came from. Prosecutors and the judges. We did a pretrial diversion bill a couple of years, and when you bring that person in, you see that addiction, and we want them to get help. We send them to treatment. And then if they don't complete treatment, you go to jail. So there's this hammer, this really good incentive. If you want liberty to be able to go get out, then you go through this treatment. And they'll sit through treatment. And it may 2 or 3 times. Then sometimes there's a percentage where it clicks. Something happens in their brain, and they reprogram, they're rebooted, and they get cured. They'll face addiction forever. But that's how we do it in America. We wait till all this bad things happen, and we spend billions of dollars trying to fix people instead of doing a lot to prevent and educate on the front end and to stop them at the counter or in schools. So, and a piece of legislation, and I'll try to move quicker here, we did on the NPLEX system, the one in 2012. We had done a meth abuse task force for a few years, and it was in the statute, but it was mostly politicians that met and had a press conference and really hadn't met again. And so I was allowed by the sponsor to rewrite that section. The Alabama Drug Abuse Task Force it's not funded, we don't have money, but the agencies involved have money. But I don't have a list of everybody, but from DHR, law enforcement, forensic sciences, the governor's office, the AG's office, the DA's, revenue, public health, we have statutory, non-statutory members of the Medical Examiner Association, anybody, pharmacists, the pharmacy board, and your pharmacist association. Louise is on our group. And our function is to look at Alabama from 30,000 feet. We hadn't done that before. And see what's working, what are trends, what can we do. And we do a report to the legislature every session within 10 to 15 days. What are the drug threats? What are we doing? And I thought it would take a lot of time for buy-in from this group. It's another board you got to be on. So I made sure I had lunch. They came over. And the first day we'd go around the room and I asked people, and I had a little thing that I do. It's kind of silly, but it's a motivational thing. It's a little clip from the Alamo, one of the movies, and where the Travis, if you're familiar with it, Travis, they're all about to die. They know that they can't get out, and this is it. So he draws a line in the sand. He says, listen, I came to Texas to be a different person, be a better guy, kind of remake myself. I'm paraphrasing. And came here for a makeover. And he said, and I'm going to die here, and so for me, I'm dying for Texas. So that's what Texas means for me. Now, I'm from Alabama. I'm not a Texas guy. But he told those people, he said, you need to decide what you're willing to fight for. So the person next to you, what are you here for? So I played that, and I kind of tossed it out at the group, and I said, okay, what are you dying for? Because there's a time in your life where you stop making more sales than you create, and that's when you start to decline. I don't know what year that is. You medical folks, you'll know. But you're dying every day. You're missing ball games. You're working late. Your back's killing you. What is it for? Is it for the dollars? What's why are you dying? And so I went around and said, why? And I tied it to drugs and addiction. And I said, well, tell me, and went around. And one interesting was from DHR. Nancy Bugner, who'd known for a long time, she said, years ago, when we took a child from home with their drugs, we placed them with a grandmother or a close family member. Now we can't because they're addicted too. So we're busting our budget on foster care. And we wonder why we have a blown budget in our state. Go to forensic science, different groups, and they say, well, it's killing us. It's really, and lost time from work, production, all these things that you're dealing with that really aren't on the ledger, You've been around to one particular person, department head, I won't name the department of the person, and that person, instead of saying budget, that person, he said, my son. That's what it was. Went back around the room, and everybody kind of said, yeah, brother, son, father, grandfather, whatever. So we had buy-in. So we're trying to work our way through this. So one of the things we did when the governor's group concluded this on drug abuse, we merged it with our task force. And we were able to obtain a grant through ADECA, and with public health and our partners, we created zeroaddiction.org. And we hope it'll go into all drugs, but there's no politicians on there, there's no sponsors, there's no vendors on there or anything. Its function is to get information and get help. And as you scroll down, you'll see, we see right here, there's the tip line. Interesting enough, we created this tip line, we ran some commercials. You may have seen some of them. I'll play one in a minute. DEA had the largest bump in tips to the tip line since they've been running the tip line out of New Orleans. So we know it had a huge effect. We've had a lot of traffic. But a lot of the tips that came in to the tip line after we went online were from doctors and pharmacists. So it was, really, they said, wow, they had never seen that before. So interesting enough. Here's one, they're just 15 seconds. I'll show you this one. You may have seen it.
Elizabeth, there's something I've been wanting to say. A few months from now, I'll be so hooked on prescription pain pills that nothing else will matter to me. Not you, not our relationship, not the kids we've talked about having. All I'll want is the drug. And soon after that, I'll probably overdose. So please, don't marry me.
Alabama's prescription, zero addiction.
And one thing we learned in our group was we brought in college and high school age kids. And I feel like I'm probably as ahead and hip on drug trends and abuses as anybody in the state. I read it, I study it, I catalog it, and I'm talking about synthetics and everything. I think I'm kind of, and one thing I found that's really interesting is I also do the cyber stuff. And so I make those cases and do the legislation, so I know the trends and what kids communicate. And I found it very similar. I used to go to talk to high schools and I said, okay, how do you communicate? Chat rooms, 2006, 2007. And then there's one day I said, hey, anybody in the chat room? They laughed. What? That's Facebook. Oh, okay, Facebook. So that's how they talk. I remember one day several years ago, I said, hey, have me out on Facebook. They laughed again because you're on Facebook, so they don't want to be on it anymore. And so, but they have all these ways to communicate, and it was amazing. Really the link between that and the designer of synthetic drugs, how they change and they kind of morph almost like technology does. But that's when we asked the kids to tell us, what's the most abused drug on your campuses? Okay, we had several of them, high school and college age. Almost in unison, ADHD meds, those Vyvanse and that kind of stuff. They said, without doubt. They said, our coaches tell us go get a prescription because you'll be more alert. And we sit down to study in the library, and everybody puts their prescriptions out there. And I'm not about kids that don't need it. If you need it, it does the things that you need to make you focus attention. If you don't, it's amphetamine, it's speed, it's crystal methamphetamine, it's meth, what it is. And you can develop meth psychosis and all the things you can get from meth, you can get from that stuff if you abuse it, over a long period of time. And so if you don't need it, it does something different, it's speed. And we see them using it and to stay awake and party. We've had ER visits and heart failure and renal failure and all kind of things from that. And it's a huge drug trend that I didn't really realize was kind of happening. So this is an effort to kind of get ahead of that. And these are just conversation starters within the family or within groups of people that see them.
And now for our next question, contestant number 7. Please tell us your name and why you feel you deserve the crown.
Hi, I'm Darlene Jones, and I've been taking prescription ADHD meds to lose weight, stay awake, and party. Soon I'll be selling to my friends, and eventually I'll be rushed to the ER and pronounced dead on arrival. So don't vote for me.
Alabama's prescription, zero addiction.
The actual story we told through that commercial, that was a person's story that we told through that character. These are attention getters kind of thing. You sit in your den with your family or whatever, because kids don't watch TV. We have a YouTube site, that kind of thing. We are producing 8 different educational DVDs with the school systems and public health with prevention partners that are going to be about 25 minutes long, each genre of drug, heroin, prescription drugs, synthetics, all the way through. That'll have actual people telling their stories, doctors talking about the effect on the body, what overdoses do, information, and then a plea, please don't use it. One thing I do when I go talk to folks, whether it's cyber, social media, or drugs, or whatever, human trafficking, whatever, I want to be able, I'll never be the most dynamic, best-looking, best-dressed speaker you'll ever have, but I want to be able to say, in the future, you'll never be able to say, I didn't know. It'll be an informed decision. You'll know the risk of that drug. And so we've got a commitment with public education to do these with curriculum 7 through 12. obviously we're not going to do heroin commercials with a program with 7th graders. It'll be graduated with alcohol and marijuana, that kind of thing. It's what we got to do. And I think that falls on you. That's a part of the PDMP. I think as a response, I know your code of ethics, I think it's 7, says your obligations to your patient, but also to the community. And I know it's frustrating. I've worked a lot of cases, I mean, tons of them. But when we're in a place in America where, and I'll give you some more stats so we can get around with stats, but the U.S. consumes 80% of the world's pain medication, but we only comprise 6% of its population. In 2010, enough prescription painkillers were prescribed to medicate every American adult every 4 hours for 1 month. Let's see, 60% of teens who abuse prescription drugs get them from friends and relatives. More teens die from prescription drugs than heroin and cocaine. 52 million people in the U.S. over the age of 12 have used prescription drugs for non-medical reasons at least once in their lifetime. Biggest abuses of prescription drugs are between the ages of 18 and 25. And the one that was mentioned earlier, every 40 to 46 minutes, every day, 40 to 46 people die from a prescription drug overdose. So while I've been here, 2 people have died in this country. That's 2 people that were somebody's mother, brother, sister, daughter. They had a life, and they deserved to enjoy that life. So I know there's a varying attitude among pharmacists about your obligations and what you must do. I know your time is precious. I know you can only do so much in a day. But I guess my plea is to be involved. I work with Louise always, and anything we do, if I'm promoting legislation, so I'm working in concert with your representatives. But we've got to do more. Ideally, if you said, okay, Barry, you get to pick how we do this, I would say that every prescription that's written is numbered like a checkbook. I reconcile my checkbook. I've worked too many pharmacy forgeries that we didn't discover until 6 months later, when there had been dozens or hundreds of pharmacies. Pharmacists didn't realize it was a forgery. They were hitting 2 or 3. Doctor didn't know because nobody knew. He wrote 200 a month or 100 a month, whatever, in these overages. If they were numbered and they were reconciled in some manner that meets the oath of doctors and patients and making sure the patients get the care, I'm okay with you guys and doctors figuring that out. But if we can make ephedrine hard, it's difficult to get cold medicine in this state. If we can work towards that, and I think the difference in that is prescription drug abuse destroys a person inside out. Meth was destroying communities and the environment. You were having labs, you were having people's property destroyed. It was affecting people that weren't even in the family. They were building labs in their homes and their rental properties, so they were raising a clamor. And so somehow we've got to focus toward that. Maybe looking at this state from, like I said, 30,000 feet and trying to figure this out, we'll get there. I'm a prosecutor. I'm a mental prosecutor. I'm for sending guys and women that manufacture and traffic and sell drugs to people for profit to jail. With that said, addiction changes a person, and we've got to do something. If we don't prevent, we've got to treat. And hopefully the website will do that. That's our focus. Feel free, you can download the videos. There's posters that can be printed if you need those. I'm sure Nancy will have my information. I'll get those to you. If your community back home, wherever you're from, has a program, you need some information, want to use this, you can have it, you can play them. We're working on educational DVDs now, so if there's anything that I can do to help you in your communities, please call on me.
Our next presenter is Dr. Jerry Harrison. He has practiced medicine in Haleyville for 34 years. He is currently the chairman of the Board of Medical Examiners and has a special interest in the treatment of opioid dependence.
First of all, let me apologize to the people that may be watching this in the future, because irreverent sarcasm and cynicism are some of the things that or just services that I provide. So some of my slides are probably inappropriate for going on this thing. But I want to touch on some things he said. 1972, you left off a drug, Quaaludes. Y'all remember, you people that's got gray hair, or y'all remember Quaalude, 1972. That's also the spring semester that I smoked pot. You look at my grades. So I've already done the study about does pot affect your grades, motivation, and stuff. I did it in 1972. My daddy cured that. I'm from Tallahassee, Alabama, and he put me to cut, raking, and baling hay during the day, and I worked in a cotton mill from 10 at night to 6 in the morning. Cured me, broke me from sucking eggs. All right, talking about the PDMPs in various states. The PDMP in Alabama has been sort of a special interest of mine. How many of you are signed up for it? Okay, I want everybody to be. And to that end, how many doctors in Alabama that have a controlled substance certificate are signed up for the PDMP? Y'all got a percentage? I'm the chairman of the board of medical examiners. 100%. The reason is you can't renew your ACSC unless you are signed up for the PDMP. Okay? We had asked people for several years to join, and we got some buy-in, but we didn't get enough buy-in, so we bought them in. Okay? How many times a day do y'all check the PDMP? I don't like that answer. How long does it take y'all to check it, if you check it? It took me until the HID improved it, it took me about 30 seconds. Now that they've improved it, it takes me about 50. So they've improved access. Now, I can tell y'all a secret about how to lock it up. Some of my frequent flyers that come in to see me, I can go in there and you can change the search date. If I go back to 2006, they got so many prescriptions from so many doctors in so many different places. It locks up the thing. Then I call them up down there. I used to be on Steve Espy's speed dial. He used to be number 2 on my speed dial. And I'd call him up and say, hey, your thing's locked up. When I call down there now, I dial this number and it's button number 8. When I call, I said, you're locked up. Oh, we hadn't heard anything about that. It's, you hear it now. It's locked up. So they do that. One thing let me tell you about, we've dealt with in the past month at the Board of Medical Examiners. If you were to print out, and I encourage you not to print out the PDMP report, disclosure of that is a violation of state law. It's a misdemeanor, but it can rise to what, Class C felony? Okay, because we had a doctor who took it on herself because she was going to help somebody out. She got in big trouble. All right, so don't do that. I spoke up at Missouri a few years ago. Their medical association got real hard up, and they asked me to speak to them, so I went up there, and I was talking about PDMP. And so, they showed that map up there, showed showed Missouri that didn't have a PDMP. I said, I know y'all that showed me state, but damn. Turns out there's a physician who is also a state senator who's blocking that. So they still don't have that. All right, I think that's all the notes that I got here. Oh, by the way, I've done some research, and I think they're finally catching on to it. One of the most contagious diseases on the college campus among freshmen is acute Adderall deficiency. When they get there and all of a sudden they're not as smart as everybody else in the class and they're not making good grades, they go back to the family doc back home. Hey, doc, I can't concentrate. You can't concentrate because you're out at the War Eagle. Well, it used to be the War Eagle Supper Club. I don't know what to do there. But anyway, all right. Okay, this is me. Y'all can call me anytime about anything. I'm grumpy when I answer the phone, but I don't mean to be. What do these things have in common? This one, this one, this one, and this one. Okay, let's go back over them so everybody got it. Like I said, I have useless slides. Who is this? Tony what? The Tiger. Who is this? John the Baptist. They all got a middle name of the. Y'all know who this is? Okay, this is a guy, this is up at Lake Martin, about 20, maybe 30 miles from here. This is a guy named Kinsley Harrison. Y'all know who that is? Okay. Y'all know who that is? That's Jim Harrison. That's me. What's the similarity there? Not much. Okay, Kinsley Harrison's probably the most famous doctor this state's ever had. This is a book called The Principles of Internal Medicine, which is the Bible of internal medicine. He was the chairman of medicine out in UAB, and he was, we now would talk about the Kirkland Clinic. If we had built that clinic 40 years ago, it would have been called the Harrison Clinic. Still wouldn't have affected me. That's the Harrison School of Pharmacy. I just got me a custom-made gun. I'll be paying on it for 5 years. Some of us have brain farts, and we don't think good. So, but one smart, I don't know about Mr. Harrison, James Harrison, he's rich, and me, I don't even get good looking. So, who's involved in bad prescription writing? Patients, physicians, and pharmacists. Or drug abusers, drug overprescribers, and drug sellers. The pharmacists, are they responsible for overprescribing? I give a lot of talks about prescribing to doctors in Alabama, and this is one of my favorite props. A patient brought this to my office. Hey, would you refill my medicine? This is my month's worth of Lortab. The doctor was writing, the pharmacist was filling. She's no longer with us. She moved from English to history. After she got that for 17 months, she developed papillary necrosis of her kidneys and died of renal failure at UAB. Here are two prescriptions, the first, second, or said in a different way, the first and the last prescription this patient got. Went to a physician who gave him 196 methadone. A month later, he went and got another one, his last prescription, for methadone. He moved from English to history. Okay? He went to bed and woke up dead. All right? Who's involved? The drug abuser, the drug overprescriber, and the drug seller. Okay? That was only 2 times for this pharmacist. This was 17 months in a row for this one. This is a different bottle. You notice I don't touch it. It's burned on the bottom. You know what that's from? They brought urine in this bottle and used a cigarette lighter to warm it up because we checked the temperature of the urine. Okay? They will do everything they can to get around you. We on the Board of Medical Examiners are trying to stop the overprescribing of medicines. We need your buy-in to the PDMP, and we ask you to use it. I've been wanting to set up an ambulance service, but we've got one that hauls people, but now that Haleyville is wet, I thought I'd set me up an ambulance service. Notice that was not in the U.S. because it's got a different set of phone numbers. I don't know where that came from. A friend of mine sent it to me, and I want to move there. None of us thinks we're responsible. It's always, it's that bad doctor. It's that you know that pharmacist. You know, you go up there, you know that. You know. We don't think we're responsible. How many of y'all have sold medication to people who are abusing drugs? Get out of here. Yeah, I mean, you hand these. If you've ever filled a prescription for a controlled substance, I guarantee you filled a prescription for a controlled substance to people that are abusing drugs. How many of you ever filled a prescription, gave the medicine to the person, and the person died of overdose? No, not me. I've written a prescription that the person died during the period of time. I find out they had other things with them. They died with a needle in their arm, but it's happened. It's happened to me, and likely it's happened to you. You just don't know it. They didn't ever come back to get the prescription next month. Okay, but we've come to a fork in the road. Okay, we got to change if we're going to help Alabama. We wrote pain clinic rules as Barry. I forgot your last name. I'm sorry. Max. Maxim. We wrote pain clinic rules at the Board of Medical Examiners a few years ago, and like everything else that I've done in life, I stumbled, bumbled, and I was inelegant in doing it. We come out with them. We said the top 10% of people we're going to make register for pain clinics. We made them get a background check. And the reason we did that is because all the ones from Florida were coming here, and we wanted to get the pain clinic owners. But the problem is, we've been doing background checks on doctors that have gotten licensed the past 8 or 10 years, and then we didn't think very well, because if the doctors have been here more than 8 or 10 years, we've already had them under our database, so we didn't take that out when we went there. We tried to say no to drugs, but the drugs don't listen. We need to think as we dream as if we'll live forever, but we need to live like you'll die today. We've got to do the right thing. You can't become what you want to be by staying as you are. There's 15,000 ACSC holders under the Board of Medical Examiners. Top 10%, then we changed to 5%. Now we've changed to 3%. That means that 3% of us have to register as pain clinics. But when I add up how this gets there, you'll see that's your primary care doctors. Because the radiation oncologist and the subspecialist, or as I call them, the partialist, don't write very many controlled substances, if they do, in a whole year. So that narrows out a good number of people by the time you get up to the people that are seeing the people that come in. I got one patient, it takes him 2 hands to order a 6-pack. He's a logger. He's worked in the woods all his life. He's lost fingers. But he can't get up and go to work unless he has some pain medicine, because he's been broke up pretty bad. But he takes his medicine. He gets up, he takes one, he goes and works in the log woods. He don't take them on the weekend. He takes about 25 or 30 a month. And he's been doing this for 10 years without an escalation of his dose. Okay, this is important here. The lighter the color, the better you are. You know, we're not white like Oklahoma or Indiana, but we're light color. Alabama's light color. We're talking about narcotic usage and the change from last year. So let me show you all something that the PDMP, the Board of Medical Examiners, and the DAs, we take pride in what I'm fixing to show you. Look for Alabama. Usually about drugs, we're up there in 1 and 2, but look over here, 49. We have had a 6.2% decrease year over year in prescription drug writing, in opioid writing. Alabama's going down. He told y'all that the United States takes 80% of the world's opioids. Our drug of choice in the United States is hydrocodone. We have about 5 to 6% of the people in the world. What percentage of hydrocodone do we take in this country? 93. What you going to give for me? Come on. 95. You're getting close. 98+% of the world's hydrocodone we take in this country. Now, let me tell you another little secret. We're from Alabama. We like to be number 1. From 1987 to 2001, I've got slides in a different pack that'll show you. We were number 1 from 1987 to 2001 in hydrocodone prescription per capita. We met with some people from the DEA in the late 80s, early 90s. They told me that Haleyville is in these counties, Walker, Winston, Marion, and Franklin. We were the epicenter of hydrocodone use in Alabama, which made us the epicenter in the whole world of taking hydrocodone. We had some people that wrote a lot of medicine up there. And some of them are not practicing anymore. Some have moved on, and some lost their license. So that's cut down a little bit. But we have made year over year, 2014 versus 13, 6.2% decrease. We're proud of that. What does it take to get there? 30 patients a day, give them a script for Norco 3 times a day, Xanax 3 times a day. They got to have a little Soma. That's 500,000 a year. That's the holy trinity in prescribing. Hydrocodone, little Xanax, just in little Xanax, the bars, the little ones. Okay? They wake up in the morning, what's the first thing they're reaching for? They got to have that hydrocodone. There's a pharmacist from the University of Georgia named Merrill Norton who talks about the reward system and the anti-reward system. And that's online somewhere. Y'all might want to look at that. He was talking about the reward system, the dopamine, but then there's the anti-reward system. The people who become dependent on medications have a particular vulnerability to it. That's the genetic variability. You know, they have a higher absolute rise in the dopamine, a rate of rise. So those people are powerless against it. Okay? Now, our ranking structure right now in the PDMP is kind of like when we rolled out the law. It's a little bit inelegant, but we were working with HID to try to change that. In the PDMP, we consider a hydrocodone 5 milligram the same as an oxycodone 80 because we count numbers of pills. And I'm trying to work with them, and they've been very kind to work with us. We're trying to change that into a morphine milligram equivalent. So we'll rank the medications based on how much morphine milligram equivalent to give them. There are various tables to change that, to calculate your morphine milligram equivalents. But I'm a country boy. And the way I figure it out is, what you give me for a 15 milligram morphine? What you give me for 10 or 15 milligrams of Norco? Okay? They'll give me more for the Norco than they will for the morphine. And they'll give me more than that for oxycodone. So that's the way I did the milligram morphine equivalents in my head. Okay, in North Alabama, the stores up there have had to change their cash boxes. You know, you got a 1 or 5 or 10 or 20 or 50 or 50 and 100. Up there, we've had to build another box. We got the 1s, we got the 5s, we got the 10s, we got the 20s, we got the 30 milligram oxycodone. It's a cash equivalent. I mean, really, it sells for $30 a piece, and there is a video, there's an undercover video, that shows a person going into a pharmacy, coming out of the pharmacy, sitting in his car, and apparently some of his friends come by, because they're all sticking their hand in and shaking hands with him or doing something, and they've got it on tape, and I don't know when they're going to use that. Hydrocodone 5, 7.5, 10, that's about $1 a milligram. Hydrocodone 30, 40, and 50, the Zohydro, etc., the Xanax bars, the Soma. You know, y'all have a price, but there's a different price right outside your door. Okay? Remember, if you live by the sword, you may be shocked by those that don't. Here's what I've suggested that we change to the PDMP, and I met with HID and the people from the state committee, from the PDMP down in the public health. And so they were very kind to listen to me. They shot down a couple of lines out of this pretty good. But, you know, we want to rank the number of unit doses. We want to rank the cumulative morphine milligram equivalents, excluding Suboxone, because that's so variable. And I use Suboxone generically. I mean buprenorphine. And I'll show you why in a second. And then this third one, what was her name? The lady that... Yeah, she explained to me why I was stupid for writing that down. And I took that the way I usually take it. Okay. But then we want the benzo ranking. We want the methadone ranking. We want oxycodone. Then we want ranking of buprenorphine equivalents. 8 milligrams of Suboxone is supposedly equal to the 5.7 of Zubsolv, the 4.2 of Butavale, and that's equal to 8 milligrams of Subutex. So I'm also trying to get a rule put in. What are the two classes of people that should use Subutex? Pregnant and lactating. Tennessee's passed that rule. If somebody comes in to tell me, you know, I can't take that Suboxone, it gives me a headache. You know, so you don't like the way it feels when you snort it? Because if they're wanting Subutex, they're wanting to do something bad with it. Okay? The naloxone doesn't really have that much side effects. I got my waiver in 1983, about 3 weeks after my mama died, and I've been writing buprenorphine since then. I went to France in 1998, and they were doing it over there. By the time it got to this country, it has helped a lot of people get off of it. Now, I don't write a lot of buprenorphine because it can be abused too. one of my friends, who was a physician, he used to drive around going from pharmacy to pharmacy with his buddy, and he'd write a prescription for Buprenex, they'd go in and get it, they'd shoot it up, and they'd go to the next pharmacist. He's been away to treatment, and it was more than 3 weeks of treatment. He stayed for about 6 months. We've also had some doctors that we took their ACSC, and when we've given it back to them, we're trying to put a little bit of a governor on them to try to keep them from getting out of control. A couple of pain doctors are on our board, and they have told us that they think that about 90% of their patients could be treated with 45 milligram morphine equivalents or less. Okay, 15 milligrams of morphine 3 times a day. Morphine 10 milligrams 4 times a day. That's below the 45 milligram morphine equivalent per day. So we have offered this to a few people. If you want your ACSC back, here's what we'll let you do. And we've had some people take it. One moved out of state. He just couldn't practice in this parameter. He was just being discriminated against too bad. Okay, it also means, you can use 7.5 hydrocodone 4 times a day, hydrocodone 10 4 times a day, or 7.5 QID, or maybe even 5 times a day. Haley, how many times have you seen a five time a day out of me? It ain't gonna happen. I mean, right after somebody breaks a bone, right after they have surgery, yeah, I'll give it to them every 3 to 4 hours for a couple of days. But how many of y'all ever broken a bone? Okay? Hurts bad. After a few days, it don't hurt quite so bad. And we as doctors, if we don't do a good job of saying, hey, look, it's been a little while since you've been injured, we need to cut down. Okay? I've told this story many times. Got a patient that comes to me. So what's wrong? My back hurts, doc. It's just killing me. What happened to you? I hurt my back playing football. I said, when was you playing football? He said, in high school. I said, hell, you're 60 years old. We as doctors are responsible to a large degree. Y'all don't call us up and say, hey, look, buddy over here, has been taking this medicine a long time. What you think? I don't ever refuse a pharmacist's phone call. Okay? And I hate it when y'all put voicemail in. I hate that stuff. I liked it when I had a doctor's line and I could call in and talk to the pharmacist. Now I got to press 2. Our choices have recently changed. It's been saying that for 15 years. But anyway, our boy, I've got it programmed into my phone sometimes, the 2, the 1, the 0, so that I can get to the pharmacist in 10 minutes. But that's what we have to do. We have to communicate. There's substantial differential bioavailability of buprenorphine products. Okay, the Suboxone, the strip under the tongue, the Zubsolv, the tablet, the Bunavail, the buccal thing. And now, do y'all know about Belbuca? Belbuca is a recently approved buprenorphine for pain oral medication. It was approved, 2 weeks ago, something like that. And anyway, it's not out yet. It's just been approved by the DEA. Now, he was talking about prescription fraud. When we, and I say we, meaning the cumulative we, when we get prescription controlled substance e-prescribing, some of our fraud and prescription forgeries will go away. For many years, I started printing my prescriptions in 1989 from my office because the pharmacists at home apparently don't have good eyesight, and they said they couldn't read my writing. And in the 5th grade, I had a grammar school teacher said, Jerry Harrison, you write so bad you ought to be a doctor. And so that's the first time I ever thought of that. But anyway, I started printing my prescriptions in 1989 to try to help the pharmacists. Through the years, a friend of mine who had developed this program, we put the patient's picture on the prescriptions. It was hard to be fraudulent with that too, because we had that kind of control. Unfortunately, he never got that certified, and now we have this meaningful use. and that's been a problem for us. So I've had to go to a different EHR, and it doesn't do that. But soon, we hope that that will have controlled substance prescribing. How many of y'all are set up for it in your office for e-prescribing or controlled substances? Well, I can't wait for me to get that. Okay, this is just talking about the limitation. Now, I know y'all didn't like the ephedrine rule. There are some people who want us to, as physicians, to access, and in Kentucky they do this, they have to access the PDMP for every controlled substance they write. We really don't want that, okay? And we hope that you will support us in not doing that. If it's forced down our throat, let's maybe put a threshold dose, whereas if they're getting more than 90 milligram morphine equivalents or above, or something like that, 90, 100, 120. A great study to be done would be to maybe get the Department of Public Health, Department of MPH, Public Health, National Public Health School, and do a study of where the dosage line is, where there's an inflection point to increase harm to patients. We don't really know that. We take it by the seat of our pants, and there are people who postulate, but then I can't find a study that's shown it, that above a certain milligram morphine equivalent is where the harm occurs. I just can't find that. That would be a great study, but alas, we can't do that. Okay, I showed y'all the big bottle. Okay. Should prescribers be required to access the PDMP? What y'all think?
Yes.
For all drugs? And for all Norco 20, they sprain their ankle, I'm giving grandma some Norco, I'm giving her 20. Should I do it for that? Should I do it if I'm giving somebody MS Contin 100 milligrams 3 times a day with oxycodone 30 milligram breakthrough Q4 hours? Yeah. You see what I'm talking about? Our PDMP counts those one by one. He was giving you some statistics a while ago. Let me tell you a couple of things. Methadone clinics don't report to the PDMP. The federal clinics at the bases, the on-site clinics, may or may not. We heard that they were going to start reporting, but I really haven't seen evidence of that. And also the VA is supposed to be starting to report, but I'm not sure that they're reporting yet. So you won't see, there are holes in the PDMP. Oh no, there's errors in the PDMP. And there are errors in it. It's more than 90% accurate, but there are errors in it. But if somebody's doing bad and we catch them 90% of the time, I don't think they ought to get off because there's an error 10 or 5 or 6% of the time. So that's my point of view on that. If we don't do something will be done to us. So we want to try to intervene to try to help the people of the state of Alabama not have the prescription drug problem we have. He said the biggest prescribing issues are with kids 18 to 24. But let's talk about the people that die. What age group is that? 28 to 45. In the 16 to 25 age group, what kills more? Boys. Let's just go boys. 16 to 25. That's when they got testosterone overload, which is a toxic chemical in itself. And they're driving cars. So what kills more? Drugs or car wrecks? Used to be. In every other age group, it's drugs. Up to the age 60s. So, we have a problem that we've caused, that we've contributed to. And this is prescription drugs. And then, we have a coroner system in Alabama. And there have been some people, young kids that died. and, you know, had one that died. And she died, and 2 years later, her husband died. You know what the coroner put on both of them? They're 22, 23 years old. Heart attack. Y'all think they had heart disease? I don't. They overdosed. So the numbers that we have are vastly underreported in Alabama. And if you heard they died and you'd prescribe them medicine, well, I didn't write a prescription for them, you know, because they died from a heart attack, because that's what the coroner said. But it's underreported. I think the likelihood of a husband and wife in their early 20s both dying from unreported, unrecognized heart disease at that age is much less likely than the fact that they had positive PDMPs, they were taking a lot of medication by prescription, and rumor has it they were buying some. So there are problems. We've caused it. We've contributed to it. We're part of it. We need to be part of the solution, not just a problem.
And welcome back. Our next presenter is Dr. Timothy Martin. He received his BS in Pharmacy and PharmD from Auburn University. Since 1987, he has been the Director of Pharmacy at the DCH Regional Medical Center in Tuscaloosa. He is currently serving his 4th year of a 5-year appointment to the Alabama Board of Pharmacy, where he currently serves as Vice President.
I do want to just say a couple of things that are kind of related to drug abuse, in fact, are related to drug abuse, but not specifically related to PDMP. For example, in my 4 years so far on the Board of Pharmacy, I was counting up the other day the number of disciplinary hearings I've sat through. And you want to take a guess at how many hearings in 4 years? And Dan, you're probably ahead of me since you have another year on me, but just guess how many disciplinary hearings in 4 years of Board of Pharmacy members are going to sit through. Have any idea? I've sat through 500 disciplinary hearings. Those are pharmacists, pharmacy technicians, and permit holders in other ways. So we're going to talk a lot about PDMP today. You're going to hear a lot of the same data that came from Mr. Matson, Dr. Harrison, and me. We're just saying it in different ways. So I think you're going to get that message pretty loud and clear today. But I also want you to know that we have some cleanup to do, you know, on our own side. It's just part of the risk. If you're a physician, a pharmacist, or a nurse, the chances are 1 out of 6 that you're going to pilfer drugs during your career. That means you either have pilfered drugs, you are pilfering drugs, or you're going to pilfer drugs. And we tell that to every group of people who come through for licensure, you know, at the Board of Pharmacy. So what we tell them is, don't be average. Those are the average statistics, and we have to do better than that. The other 2 things I want to leave you with: when pharmacists pilfer drugs, what do they tend to pilfer drugs for? For their own use. Okay? When a pharmacy technician pilfers drugs, what do they tend to pilfer drugs for? To steal, right? I'm saying pilfer, I just need to say when pharmacists steal drugs and technicians steal drugs, okay? Another audience participation question. What do you think is the greatest number of dosage forms that we've run across in my 4 years that have been pilfered from one site? Anybody want to take a guess? 1,000. Somebody thinks that there's been 1,000 dosage forms pilfered. 20,000.
I'll say 50.
50,000. Is somebody back in the back participating when they shouldn't be? 175,000 dosage forms. So we're going to hear today a lot about PDMP, about that group that's abusing the process of legitimately obtaining prescriptions and having them filled. But we've got some work to do, guys. Where can I find information on the PDMP? And these are the legal citations if you want to go to those. And why was it established? We know that hydrocodone is the most frequently prescribed opioid in the U.S. I think Dr. Harrison mentioned that. And it's associated with more abuse than any other illicit or licit opioid. We've had 2 or 3 people talk today about unintentional drug overdose deaths, and this one just puts it in a little different term than we've heard earlier. A death occurring every 12.45 minutes. So we ought to have a clock going on in the background about every 12.75 or 12.45 minutes rather. It ought to chime to bring that to our awareness. Of the 41,340 unintentional deaths, over half of them were due to prescription drugs. And of those, 73.6% were due to opioids, and it's the fastest prescription drug abuse, that is, it's the fastest growing drug problem in the United States. And it was mentioned just a few minutes ago, how does it rank with other causes of death? So in 2009 was the first time those lines crossed. And in 2009, drug-induced deaths were greater than motor vehicular accidents, suicide, deaths by firearm, or by homicide. So this is not a small thing. In Alabama, we have what I understand to be the highest number of painkiller prescriptions per year in the U.S. at 143 per 100. And at the time this survey was done, I'm guessing it's prior to some of the data that Dr. Harrison will share with us, we were tied with Tennessee at that number, and Hawaii is on the other end of the scale at only 52. So we do have a problem in the state. You've heard this said several times today already. 5% of the U.S. population, of the world's population, but my numbers said 99.3% of the world's hydrocodone use. I saw it put in a little different format at 79,700 kilograms a year is what we use in the U.S. Number 2, the UK, 200 kilograms. Huge, huge, huge difference. So if the point hasn't already been made, that probably drives it home. Here's one I stole from the DEA. Any of y'all make it to the DEA awareness conference in Birmingham back in March? I think it was. I see one, a couple of people. I know some of the folks in the back were there. Here's one that shocked me. Drug poison deaths involving either an opioid analgesic or heroin, and this goes back to 1999. And you can see the yellow lines, that what's happening with the opioids. So we're actually seeing more people die from pharmaceutical grade opioid use than we're seeing die from heroin use. Now, that kind of blew me away. The law was established in 2004. I think reporting began in maybe 2006, if I'm not mistaken. It does go through the Alabama Department of Public Health, and they control the database and keep it up to speed. All the information is declared privileged and confidential. I appreciate Dr. Harrison saying don't print it out. You don't want to do that. There are some penalties that we'll cover in just a minute if you happen to do the wrong thing with that information. As I understand it, I'll defer to D.A. Matson on this one, that the information in the database is not subject to subpoena or discovery in a civil proceeding. Is that correct?
Civil, but criminal.
In criminal it is. Okay. So it is protected information to some extent, but it can be used, obviously, for investigatory or evidentiary purposes. How many other states use it? Again, data you've already seen Brent's map on this, 48 states. And as far as I know, Missouri's still not taking any action and going in that way. New Hampshire and D.C., New Hampshire obviously a state and D.C. obviously a district, have enacted legislation, and we're going to see them come on board very soon if they haven't already, because this is a bit dated back to 2014. So what are the goals? Brent mentioned this earlier in his introduction, and why are we here today is for the fourth goal, to educate physicians, pharmacists, policymakers, law enforcement, and the public regarding diversion, abuse, and misuse of controlled substances, and this is for the pharmacist group today. What does the law require? Anyone who dispenses a controlled substance in Alabama is required to report to the PDMP. There are some exceptions. Those were mentioned earlier. Methadone clinics currently don't have to report, and federal facilities currently don't have to report. Those may change. And dispensers include a pharmacy or a veterinarian or a dispensing physician or anyone else licensed in Alabama through their regulatory board to dispense. And you may wonder, well, what does dispensing mean? And the law is very clear. It says that dispensing is when the person is going out of the door with it, or it's being sent to the patient. So if you're going to a hospital and you get a medication, that's not reportable. But at the hospital, if we send a controlled substance prescription home with you, that is, we filled it and the drugs are going home with you, then we have to report that. So hospitals are not exempt from reporting. A while back, the law changed to daily. Is anybody not aware that the law changed to daily? So I guess everybody in here is up to speed on that. There are some standards that you have to report by, and I won't go into those. HID will be glad to share with you what those are. And if you don't happen to have software, there's a way to get around that, and you can send in those reports in some other fashion. Now, this is the key for the Board of Pharmacy today. Everybody has to send in a report, even if your report says 0. Okay? So, everybody aware of that? Okay. Those are the ones. We're kind of we're in the relatively early stages of making this process work. And right now, that is a big concern of ours, that it appears there's some pharmacies still out in the state that don't understand if they don't have any activity, they still have to submit a 0 report. So those are likely to be the ones, from the Board of Pharmacy's perspective, we're going to take action on the earliest. And the daily reporting began November of 2014. Vets, mentioned earlier, also only have to report monthly. Why is it better to report daily? Well, it's more work on you, obviously. But remember, this information is being used in almost real time. There are some states that are on a real-time basis. But we'd sure rather have that information coming in on a daily basis than on a monthly basis. So when you access it, or when the physicians access it, it's as up-to-date as reasonable. Now, what does the Board of Pharmacy expect? I already mentioned the 0 report, and that is very, very important. Here's another one. Anyone in the audience, don't raise your hand, anyone not heard of what's called corresponding responsibility? Okay, very important aspect of the law. It says in the Code of Federal Regulations that it's the responsibility for proper prescribing and dispensing that's placed on the practitioner, meaning the physician or the prescriber, but the pharmacist does not get off the hook. So when Dr. Harrison was holding up, did you take your big bottle back?
It's one of my favorite things.
Okay. We'll get you more of those if you need them. That pharmacist had a corresponding responsibility under the law and could be prosecuted for doing what he did. Now, these are the cases. I gave you the citation from the CFR, but below that are 4 court cases that have held that up. So, and I think I'm preaching to the choir. I think, if you had enough interest in PDMP and prescription drug abuse to be here today, except for the 18 that are just here for the CD, you probably already know that you have a corresponding responsibility and that you can't just stick your head in the sand. You've got to step up and take action. And we'll be talking about that a little bit more toward the close of the program. Make sure that if anything changes with your address, with your ownership, with your DEA certificate number, make sure you get that to the Board of Pharmacy. That's how the information gets over to the Public Health Department, okay? And if that information is wrong in that database, it's going to cause a lot of problems. We have some pharmacists who they've moved and they've not informed the Board of Pharmacy in a timely manner, and it's really messed up some of the data. Report on a daily basis. Use your DEA number. You remember there was a time when there were other numbers used. So if there's any confusion about what number you should use, it's your DEA number, and again you have to do the zero report. Now the bottom one is something that I continue to be a little bit confused about, because we have pharmacists who will call the Board of Pharmacy about something a physician's done. Or we'll have a physician call the Board of Pharmacy about something that a pharmacist has done. And we really want to make it the responsibility of the pharmacist to call the physician, and the responsibility of the physician to call the pharmacist. And we're not going to legislate this thing away. It's probably, to one extent or another, always going to be with us. But whatever we do to make it better, we're going to have to do it as a team. And I'm sensing that on the physician side, there's an interest in participating on that team. And I'm challenging the pharmacists to also be a member of that team and step up.
Thank you, Tim, for bringing perspectives from the Alabama Board of Pharmacy. Now, this wraps up the first portion of our program. We're going to go to break. We'd welcome you to go take a break if you need to, but we'll come back. We urge you to come back for the next portion. And the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to look at the database and how to actually go in and search for a particular patient's information. So we hope to see you back again soon.